Hey, yo, welcome. Community Conversations. Super glad you guys decided to join us tonight. Coming to you live on Facebook Live, on YouTube Live, from our living room. This is it. We've got a panel joining us tonight, and glad you're joining us tonight as well at home. This is the first one we're doing, our first Community Conversations this fall, and really the vision behind it is just to take certain topics that are going on in our communities, going on in our culture, and just taking a biblical look at those things. There's a lot going on in the world right now. We can't even meet physically at church within ministries. I mean, we've got Thursday night, Sunday night coming up here, or Sunday morning here pretty soon. But we as a ministry just wanted to take the opportunity to gather virtually and just talk about some important topics. And the topic this week we're going to be talking about is emotional well-being, mental health. It's a crazy world out there. I don't have to tell you that. You can see it in the news. Even looking at today, they're canceling NBA games. There's civil unrest in the midst of another police shootings. There's 3 Category 6 hurricanes coming after Texas right now. So if you're a person who says you're sane in the culture and the world that we live in right now, you're probably lying. Yeah, exactly. I want what you're on. But yeah, so we're joined here by some awesome panelists, some folks who have been involved in the ministry and have been a part of the ministry for a while. So I want to give you guys a chance to introduce yourselves. So why don't you go one by one, tell us who you are, what you do, and if you were an animal, which animal would you be? Lindsay?
Thanks, David. Yeah. So, hey guys, I'm Lindsay Bull. I am a student right now at NC State. So I'm actually graduating in December, which is super exciting, but talk about anxiety. But I'm double majoring in Spanish and psychology. And so my world was kind of shaken, and I was really introduced to the whole mental illness side of things when I was in 7th grade. I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. Long story short, I got a virus that caused the serotonin levels in my brain, basically the thing that makes you happy. They became imbalanced, and so then it turned into a full-blown disorder. So before that, I had no concept of what mental illness was, or of the struggles of depression and anxiety. So through that, Christ has really been able to just expose my purpose. And so my plan is to do what Miss Carrie does eventually, hopefully, and be a clinical therapist. And then if I was an animal, oh boy, I would have to say probably a cat. I love cats. I'm definitely a cat person, but also they just get to sleep a lot, and I'm the queen of naps. So I would love to be a cat and just get pet. Who doesn't want to be pet? But yeah, Matt disagrees. Yeah, but yeah, that's me.
That's why we put you two apart.
Right.
Hello, my name is Carrie White, and I am a wife and a mom, and I work at Hope Community Church with the Kid City team. And I just Monday started a new adventure. I am going to grad school both for a Master's of Divinity and a Master's in Clinical Mental Health Counseling, because I am really passionate about the intersection of good theology and good psychology. I think the world needs more voices creating language and normalizing conversations like this one. More than anything, I'm here because I have 26 some years of experience in anxiety management, which is not something you can put on a resume, but I wish it were. Oh, animal. Okay, if I were an animal, I would be a parrot on the outside and an owl on the inside. So I've got a lot of energy, I like creativity and colors, and I'm fun, but internally I have this deep kind of wise, inside space. So both and. I'm not a boring owl, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
That's a great combo. My name is Matt. I am also married. My wife just got a promotion. I don't even know if I'm supposed to say that yet. It's out there. We've got 2 Bambinos, and I work at Hope with the young adults. And I love. We've said that, I've said this when we've talked about issues that are hard to talk about, or heavy issues, or complex issues. Is I love presenting this to this audience, to young adults, and I think there's a lot of movement that can happen. And a lot of things have changed even in the last 10, 15 years in speaking about, or the approach to, or the presuppositions about mental health. And you guys are changing that. I don't even know where I'm looking. Now you guys are changing that. So it's exciting to be able to do that. I don't bring any expertise into it. I talk to a lot of people that struggle with a lot of things, and I experience my own struggles. So we're excited to be here. If I were an animal, I like Carrie's combo. I'm going to go with silverback gorilla on the outside. Strongest one ever, but probably like, I don't know, something real weak on the inside. Like a peacock on the inside. There we go. How about that?
The irony is we rehearsed this and all of your guys' animals changed
Yeah,
since we did it the first time.
Fair.
Well, we're also joined by a real animal, Leia. You'll see her running around. She was posting up somewhere. I don't know where she is, but she's going to join the discussion about emotional and mental health. She stretches my emotional health a lot, but we love her. And we're also joined by her dad in the streaming center, Jason Schmidt. Jason, you want to tell the audience a little bit about how they can get involved in the conversation?
Muted. See, it was the mic that was muted the whole time. Of course. Hi, guys. We're going to do this again. What's up? Welcome. If you guys have any burning questions, if you want to let me know that the mic is still off, comment below in our chat on Facebook Live or YouTube if you're the one person that watches. I know Colin's not on YouTube, so probably no one today. You know, you didn't ask me, but I would go with a wolf. Thank you for caring so much about my personal animal choice. But I'd have to go with something more clueless now. I think I gotta change mine too. But let's get back to you, whose mic works.
Always setting Jason up for success. Always. Little comedy. So thanks for that, Jason. Yeah, like he said, feel free to weigh in on the conversation. And something he didn't mention, if you either share this video or send us a question, you'll be entered into a raffle for a $50 Amazon gift card. So go ahead and either share or weigh in with a question. And of course, over text message, the questions are anonymous as well. I know this can be a sensitive issue, so if you want an anonymous question, feel free to shoot us a text over there as well. But we got some questions that have already come in. Are you guys ready to rock and roll, jump into this?
Yeah, I think we're ready.
All right, so I'm just going to throw this one out here. First one is, how would you distinguish the difference between mental health, emotional health, and spiritual health? Any insight?
Yeah, so I think that they can all be very closely connected. And it's kind of usually like a snowball effect. You know, if one is really out of whack, then it kind of affects all of the others. And I think emotional health and mental health are really tied together. I think a lot of the times, just like if our mental health is not, you know, as great or as healthy as we'd like it to be, a lot of the times that is expressed outwardly in our emotions. And so, yeah. Do you have anything to add? Yeah, cool.
I think when we look at the concept of shalom, which is a Hebrew word that means peace, but also means wholeness. And so if we understand at the fall that was broken, our wholeness was broken. And so it makes sense that we tend to feel like we're in pieces sometimes, like we have this mental peace and this emotional peace and this spiritual peace and this physical peace. And so I think that health and all of those things is actually moving towards wholeness. And so I think that integration is actually a really good word, like into whole person, like integrating your mental, emotional, physical, spiritual self is honestly part of the process. What does that look like? And then I think just talking about spiritual health too, I think sometimes that can get a little sticky because we think about health as everything's going right. If I am spiritually healthy, then I'm, everything's fine in my life. And I've actually found that my spiritual maturity increases often when I'm feeling the weakest, and often when I feel really needy and really overwhelmed. That's actually where God meets me. So I think spiritual health or spiritual maturity looks more like increased dependence on Jesus, which increases, intimacy, which then transforms you as a person in all ways. So.
While we're talking about differences, someone else weighed in about the difference between stress and anxiety, and saw a stat that showed that 77% of people experience stress that affects their physical health, and so they feel the stress. It has some sort of effect on them. So you kind of hear sometimes those two words used interchangeably. What would you guys say are kind of the differences?
I know I think it varies depending on the person. I think we show the effects of stress and the effects of our anxiety. It kind of comes out differently in every person. For me, I tend to see my anxiety really start to become an issue when I can't control things. And so a lot of that is I'll just, whether it's like a physical, physiological, like it gets harder to breathe, or I might, just have to take time just to be quiet. And stress, I think both of these words are really thrown around a lot. And so it's kind of like the word love, we throw around love, like I love my dog, which I do, but also, it kind of takes away the meaning of it. And so, I also just want to point out that there is good stress. So a lot of the times when we talk about stress, we talk about the negative stress, but there is something called eustress, and that's the stress that we use, like, for instance, before we have an exam, like you have that kind of just a little bit of stress, but that's what motivates you to go and study and to do those things. But at the same time, really with mental illness or with anxiety or depression, when it really starts to become an issue that needs to be addressed is when it starts to inhibit your daily functioning.
I love that you use the word eustress, fellow psych majors. I think one of the important things to understand, and I think it's really helpful and it's been empowering is the right word for me, but to kind of understand what's happening in my brain and my body when I am anxious. And I think one of the assumptions about anxiety is that it's just excessive worry or it's excessive stress, and it's actually a really different process in your body and in your brain. So anxiety is what happens when you feel a threat in your environment. So then that's different for everybody. It's going to be different for Lindsay than it is for me, and for Matt than it is for me. But something is sensed by your body as a threat. And so it sends signals to your brain, because your brain, it's not just in your head, it's actually in your whole body with your nervous system. And what happens is your prefrontal cortex, which is up here, your upstairs brain, kind of goes offline, and that's the part of you that is, rational. It's the part of you that can think clearly, and it, makes you, and it's your personality, and it's time, it's problem solving. That kind of goes offline, and your downstairs brain, a part of your brain called the amygdala, gets triggered, and that is the part of your brain that is responsible for fight or flight or freeze or fawn. There's lots of different ways that can exhibit itself, but it's basically your brain saying you're in danger, either run, which would be flight, or panic attacks, that feeling like panic attack, you feel like you're dying because your body thinks that you are, and that's miserable. It's terrifying. So that's a flight response. A fight response is an anger or a rage or this kind of outpouring of, I need to fight for my life. And freeze is, my husband's watching, this is what he does. It's kind of, you just shut down. You don't have words. You can't think clearly. Nothing is there. You're like, I know things. I'm a smart person. Why can't I think of things? So that's what's happening in your brain. And there are, your nervous system and the hormones, it's all kind of taking over. And I think it's helpful to know that that is a normal process. It's a human process.
Putting Caleb last on the live stream. Wow.
I was waiting for him to comment, but I haven't seen it yet.
They're probably coming. Matt, I'm going to throw this one to you if that's okay. We've had a question come in that asks, what are some preconceived notions that you disagree with or may not be true that we as an audience need to know regarding mental, emotional health?
It's good. It's good. I'm going to add on a little bit here before I jump into that because I am a part of the problem when it comes to a lot of preconceived notions. But as Carrie's talking about how the brain works and where the amygdala is and those things, it's all very good. I think it's important. There is neuroscience that supports the idea that God wired our brains for joy. And we use the word joy in the church and often don't even know what that means. Like, what does it mean to be joyful? In your mind, you may think of like a Happy Meal. I might think of a Happy Meal. They call it a Happy Meal for a reason, joy, right? But joy is actually, and there's science to prove this. I didn't do the science, but there's science to prove this, that it is the experience of having someone pursue you and want to be with you and be engaged with you. And if that's how we are wired as human beings, and then there's some kind of malfunction in that's triggered by anything, a traumatic scenario or whatever happened in seventh grade, a virus, isolation that's prolonged because of COVID or any of those things, and the way we're wired is to be in relationship with not only other people. Like, we've talked about community a lot, but that's really like Christ coming after his people. And you can even see kind of a correlation between what happened in the garden, where Adam and Eve were with God, sin separated them, and God has continued to pursue man throughout time. And Adam and Eve's response was to hide from God. And that's what we do. And I think a lot of these mental health issues or mental illness is like the reaction is shame. The reaction is I can't share this. The reaction is and I can't be in community, or nobody's going to get me, or I'm part of the other. And one of the things that's a takeaway out of these conversations is like we have to be and to return to joy is the return to communion with God, communion with his people, and be open about what I'm struggling with, what my anxiety is, what OCD is, being comfortable for somebody who doesn't have OCD, understanding what that even means and how that's lived out in somebody else is how we, live or love our neighbor. So I think it's interesting that, when the religious lawyer asked Jesus what the greatest commandment is, and he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, like the wholeness that Carrie is talking about, right? Love him with that wholeness, that well-being, but also love your neighbor. Like, we can't love our neighbor if we're not in this union with God first, and our well-being isn't healthy. And it's the same, this illustration is probably overused, but I think it works perfectly on an airplane. Whenever, for whatever reason, when the masks drop down, the instruction is that if you are a parent, cover your own face up first, and then you can take care of this child, who you care about more than your own life. But you can't serve them without being healthy first. So even in having this discussion, I think is alluding to a lot of that. What was your question? Oh, preconceived notions. The preconceived notion issue, and this is where like I'm a contributor to this. I am intimidated by the term anxiety. It gets used a lot. There's like clinically diagnosed anxiety. So I think the stuff that Carrie and Lindsay have both mentioned, like the vocabulary is confusing when it comes to what is mental health or mental illness. What's the difference in mental health, mental illness, and like the vastness of what that means. I think seeking 15 years ago, and maybe not even, this may still be true, seeing a therapist, seeing a counselor presents you as weak, presents you as high maintenance or broken. And nobody wants to be any of those three things. So, but I also think, like I said earlier, I think that this generation, your agents of change, and having conversations and being willing to express and experience and be patient with an older generation, really what a healthy well-being is, because it's just, it's what's going to get us to a place where we are healthier for sure. Anyways, I know you guys have more to say.
I love that you use the word weak. What else did you say? Yeah, the idea of weak, broken, high maintenance. I have felt high maintenance my entire life. And that's why, because I know that I bring to the table struggle and brokenness, and that for many, many years has felt really shameful. And I think that there's this understanding that, well, if you were strong enough, if you could just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which is my least favorite phrase in the world, then, you know, if that's strength, and we even define spiritual maturity that way when we can pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. So that is a phrase and a term around mental health that I think is a preconceived notion that I very much disagree with, because I think that when we can embrace the story God's given us, and when we can recognize our weakness and ask questions about it and be curious about it and understand what it's trying to tell us, we actually come into an experience of God's strength. You know, that's 2 Corinthians 12:9. You know, his grace is sufficient for me because his power is made perfect in my weakness. It's not that his power makes my weakness stronger. His power is made perfect inside my weakness. And so it's actually a beautiful experience of God's power that I get to embrace, even when I'm struggling with something like anxiety or depression, both of which I still struggle with.
Definitely. Going along with the weak and just the preconceived notion that getting help or going to therapy or even just struggling with anxiety causes you to be weak. I think, honestly, I've learned that one of the strongest things I've ever done in my life was take that step to go get help. And so I think a lot of strength just comes in talking about these things and admitting these things and being vulnerable. And then I think one of the biggest, one of them, of the preconceived notions that I really struggle with outside of, you know, the notion that mental health or struggling with it makes you weak is that depression has to look a certain way. And that you have to fit certain, you know, you have to go through the bullet points in order to be depressed. And so I think there is so much that is going on underneath and in our mind and in our soul that people can't see. And although there are times with anxiety when it's a physiological response to where it's an outward, you know, panic attack or something like that, I think a lot of the times the things we struggle with can't be seen. And so I know in my life and during this time, during COVID, and a lot of people I think during this time have been struggling with these new anxieties, and people who might not have, you know, ever gone to therapy or even knew what anxiety was are getting to feel this unrestlessness and just kind of like, what is this? Where did it come from? How can I give it back? But really. And so I think it's not just, I think this conversation isn't just for people who, you know, are diagnosed with mental disorders. I think it's for everyone. And I think that is the biggest thing, is that it's on a spectrum, that mental illness and anxiety and depression is always on kind of like a parabola. It's always like, it's not like you have to be, Matt's over here going crazy. Okay, sorry. I don't know where these words are coming. It's just coming out. But, you know, you don't have to cry all the time to be depressed. Like, I know in my life, it's very easy for me to have talks like this and to, you know, laugh and be Lindsay, but it's really only at the quiet times and the times that I'm alone, and it's really only the people that are closest to me that see the dirty, that see the just the brokenness of depression. And so I just really encourage you guys, whether it's yourself or friends, just to kind of be looking and understanding that the first thing we need to really understand is that there's so much that goes on that's not outwardly expressed, and it's very hard to outwardly express things. And so, like, when you're asking your friends how they are, we're really bad at, like, how are you? I'm good. Oh, good. Okay. And then we move on, you know, but like, what does that mean that you're good? Like, let's talk about that. Like, what does it mean to you that you're good? Or I'm not having a good day. Okay. What does that mean? Like, let's get down to like what's really going on here. So yeah, I think that's really important.
Go ahead, Carrie.
When you talked about not being able to see it externally, I use an example frequently where it's like, if I had a broken arm or a broken leg, everyone would know Carrie can't walk up the stairs. She probably needs someone to go bring her food or bring her a book or, sit with her upstairs so she's not alone upstairs all the time. You can really see it. And so I think that's the hard thing for me when I'm struggling with anxiety. And I've, got 26 years of experience trying to keep it under wraps and trying to continue functioning, even though all of this is constantly going on under the surface, is I need help, but it's so hard to ask for it because no one can see it. It's not an obvious kind of help that is needed. So
I think too, you feel like you have to justify because you can't see it. With a broken leg, you don't have to justify that you have a broken leg. Like, everybody can see that, and so a lot of the times I feel like it can be really tiring because people who struggle with this stuff don't know how to express. Like, it's like, how do you express to someone like that has never experienced depression or anxiety what it is? And so it's like it feels like you have to kind of prove yourself. And I think a lot of it is because there is that stigma that it's like, in order to be seen as okay for going to therapy, you have to really be depressed. And that's another preconceived notion, is that you have to be super depressed to go to therapy. I think therapy is for everyone. I think therapy is for healthy, mentally healthy. I think therapy is for so many different people, and I don't think that you have to necessarily have a diagnosed mental disorder to go to therapy. It could be just stereotypical life stressors that you could, or family issues or things like that could really help with therapy. Yeah.
Like, when we talk about therapy, we're talking about communicating the things that are going on inside to this expert, right? Like, is that a thing that was created because we don't know how to love our neighbor? Like, we don't know how to have community. So they're like, oh, here's a pro, go talk to them and have your insurance pay for it. As opposed to having genuine relationships where we're not saying, hey, how are you? Great. It seems like there's something there. Maybe.
You're asking that question to two future counselors. You're messing with our job security. Just kidding. No, I think that's a great question because I think it's yes and. I think that we don't know how to talk about it. We don't know how to deal with the discomfort. We don't know how to sit with people when they're struggling and suffering and the awkwardness that can bring, and we don't want to say the wrong thing. And, so there is that element to it. I think there's also an element to it that, in the same way that, you can't fix my broken leg, there's a understanding of the processes going on in your brain and there's an understanding of the science behind all of that and the clinical side of it too, that I think that it is beneficial. I mean, I've done a variety of different therapies. It's not necessarily just talk therapy, which is I think what we assume when we think about counseling is like someone should lay on this couch back here and we'll just see how they're doing. There's I do EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing, and that's a process that actually uses how my brain works to help take unhealthy brain pathways and create new ones that are healthier. And so that, those kinds of things require some expertise, if you're looking at cognitive behavioral therapy, which, helps in a similar way understand how the brain works and put into practice behaviors that help improve your anxiety. So it's a both and.
Carrie, I like how you're taking these big words and these big concepts and explaining to them like we're 5, because that's the only way I can receive it. Yeah. And I think Matt was triggered by the word parabola because that's what he lost in his 5th grade spelling bee too.
Oh, Matt.
Fun fact.
Do you want to talk about it?
Well, while you guys were talking about preconceived notions, we had a couple good questions come in. I want to read the first one. This one is, in terms of finding our purpose in Christ and loving others, how can we as Christians prioritize self-care and our personal mental health while also loving others and putting them before ourselves? It's a good question, a lot there.
That's one that I think we all will always work on answering in our own lives. But I think Matt kind of touched on this earlier, but it's kind of like you can't pour from an empty cup. And so a lot of the times, at least for me, knowing I'm an Enneagram too. So I'm definitely the one to just go ahead and rush out, and Matt doesn't like them, and help people. But a lot of the times I realize that, I think part of when Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself, you first have to be able to love yourself to love your neighbor. And so a lot of that is like making sure that my spiritual health is good. And for me, prioritizing self-care is really making sure that I'm grounded in the word. Like that is especially during this time, and I like definitely struggle with it still. And a lot of it, as we talked about earlier, is I think Matt, you were talking about it. We want to run from God. You know, we want to run from help. We want to run from God in general, because it's hard to like take this step to get the help and to work through these things. So yeah, just really like for me, it's making sure that my relationship with Christ is okay before I just expend myself. And that can be so hard because, you know, we love our friends. You know, when somebody comes to you with a problem, you don't want to be like, you know, I'm really just working on myself right now. Like, I can't help you. But for me, it's loving people sometimes at a distance and making sure that they're getting the help that they need if I'm not the one that's in the position to help them. So really just like knowing the resources to give and say, hey, well, I know this person is like really awesome at helping with this stuff, just so that we don't feel like all of the pressure is on us. Yeah.
And I think too, along with that, when you're thinking about helping other people and what does it look like to serve others, it's really easy, especially I think sometimes, I mean, you two on the Enneagram, but especially sometimes we can wrap our identity up in the fact that we help other people. And that, where is that coming from? Well, that's coming from me, and that's coming from my own strength. So I think that when we're grounded in Christ and we're spending time, you know, for me, mental health and emotional health looks a lot like a lot of time in prayer. So that's a prayer walk, and it's just like repetitive scripture in my head that I'm praying out loud to the Lord, so that I'm essentially training my brain to find my security in Him. If I'm not doing that, I'm running on fumes. And when I'm running on fumes, I'm drawing from my strength, not His. And so I think it's actually really easy to get stuck in this space where we're only drawing from our own selves. And that's actually pride. So it's, who are we drawing from? What well are we drawing from? How are we being refreshed? Because only when we're drawing that from Christ can we outpour and be a refreshment for somebody else.
Not only is God the one you have to be drawing from, but like, who are you really trusting is doing the fixing if you can't walk away from somebody? Like, we have to come to a point that we really believe that God loves our neighbors more than we do, and He's in control of it, and He's got it, and we can take a lot of ownership in a lot of the things we do. We put our identity in helping for sure, but trusting that God cares more than you do, and He's there. And I think just continuing to point people to it. Community, again, being a support system is huge. Somebody sent me a statistic recently. I'm on a diet, don't worry about it, but they said something like it was like 85% of diets fail because of a lack of a community, and that's just accountability, and that's people continuing to point you to stuff. So what was the next one?
Well, you got dozens of people online watching that'll hold you accountable, Matt.
Thanks,
now that you put it out there.
That's good.
But you guys talked a lot about helping. That kind of leads in well to our next question. It comes to us on Facebook. It says, how do you reassure someone who has mental health or mental illness and doesn't want to seem like a burden to their friends with their problems they are going through in life on a daily basis?
I feel like I'm going to give a real simple answer here.
Every answer is well.
I think it's reassurance. It's setting a space that is safe for them to express who they are, what they're feeling, and you're not trying to fix them. You're trying to allow them to share what they're going through, what they're feeling, what is the burden, in a place where you're not the solver, but they can process their thoughts or their feelings or whatever they're going through safely. Yeah.
Yeah, I had my husband, when we were dating, I had a panic attack for the first time in front of him, and I was sure he was out the door. Sure. And we were young, we were like 17. So, and I remember saying to him, hey, like, I get if this is too much for you. Like, I understand that I am high maintenance. I understand that this is a lot. And he in whatever like 17-year-old reliance on the Spirit he had, said, I can't fix it for you, only God can do that, but I'll hold your hand through it. And he has done that. And so I think the flip side of that, I know he's just really great, but what I was going to say is he's done that. It's the consistency. You say it once, and then you show up again, and then you show up again, and then you show up again. And when you're experiencing anxiety, you isolate because of the shame, because of a lot of different things, and fear and energy, a lack of energy. When I'm super anxious, I don't have energy to reach out to a bunch of people, and then I feel guilty that I haven't responded to text messages, so I isolate. And so showing up and saying, hey, I know that you may not have the energy for this, but I'm here, and I'm going to show up for you anyway, and I'm going to come bring you Starbucks, and I'm going to, come do your dishes, and I'm just going to sit in your house even with you, even if you have nothing to say. And it's continually doing that consistently over time to demonstrate that you mean that.
Yeah. I mean, you guys touched on it. Yeah, I think it's a lot of it is, Matt, you don't have to be qualified in knowing parabolas and I know, sorry about the word. But, just showing up, like you said, like just being there, and that kind of, without having to say you're not a burden, that shows that that they're not a burden to you, because obviously when something's burdening us, we usually try to avoid it, and so just and I also think that's another, like, I think society, we're so individualistic that a lot of the times whenever we're seeking help or doing anything or needing the help of others, we're like instantly shameful about it, like, oh my gosh, I'm being a burden, because in this society, it's, you do things for yourself, it's always just the latter. And so, yeah, I think that's a really good question. Yeah. Anything else?
Don't ask me. I have nothing to add. I'm here to learn.
Yeah.
I see Caleb weighing in. Carrie, you put him on blast earlier. Now he's basking in the spiritual maturity compliment. But I think he probably peaked at 17. It's all been downhill from there, right?
I mean, dude's wise. Lots of wisdom.
This next question also comes to us on Facebook, kind of in the same extent what we were talking about. This person asks, so I struggle a lot with leaving room for myself each day. I will exhaust myself doing school, teaching, and helping friends, but I'm struggling a lot with Zoom burnout. A lot of us can relate to that. What are some easy daily mental self-care tips?
Yeah. Once again, I feel like this might answer everything, but self-care looks different for every person. For some people that could be taking 10 minutes to go shower. And right now I think a lot of it, at least for me, is just getting outside. Whether that's going on a walk between classes or just literally getting that sunlight that helps with endorphins, or exercising. But a lot of it is just setting boundaries. Kind of like when you start to feel yourself getting that burnout, when you start to feel yourself giving yourself 10 to 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever you think you need, to just take a break. And I know that can be almost counter intuitive sometimes, because it's like you take the break and then you feel bad for taking the break, because it's like, oh my gosh, okay, well now I have 30 minutes of homework to do. But really, like, those 15 minutes that you take to sometimes it's just breathing. Like, sometimes it's literally just sitting and just taking in breaths, putting on quiet music, whatever it is for you, whatever. Honestly, it really, I think self-care, it comes down to, like, what do you like to do? Like, in your free time, what do you like to do? Like, do you like to sing? Do you like to play guitar? Like, do that for 15 minutes. I'm using 15 minutes a lot. It can be dance, Mike Owens. You can yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
He hasn't been posting many dance videos recently,
Mike,
though.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
I
Love you,
think
Mike.
that it can be really overwhelming, and sometimes we look at self-care is all of these things that I need to be doing. I need to be going to bed on time, getting up on time, and being in my Bible and praying and exercising. It feels like a lot. And so I think for me, it's been really helpful to spend time listening to the Lord and asking him for one thing. What's one thing that he's calling me to do in my day that I can set aside time for, whether it's 15 minutes or 5 minutes, that I can do consistently on a daily basis, and that grounds me in him as my security and my refuge. So right now for me, that looks like I'm setting my alarm at the same time every morning. I'm getting up, I'm getting right out of bed, I'm going for a walk. And it's just a, 10-minute walk to the end of our street and back. And in that space, I'm choosing a verse and just kind of repeating that in my head. So it becomes almost this like walk breath prayer kind of thing. So, deep breathing and continually saying that verse, in you, O Lord, I find my rest. It's something as simple as that.
You get super sweaty on that walk, because I do. It's real humid in the morning. I was like 98%. I don't know how that's possible. I think it's probably not just, it's a good question, like the Zoom burnout thing, but like just burnout period, information burnout. There's so much coming at us. I was very focused yesterday. I was doing some work, writing an email that had to be done or something, and like a notification comes up on my phone. I shared this with David earlier. A notification comes up on my phone that an NBA player had said something. I didn't know what he said or what he was talking about, so I clicked on that link, and that link took me to a story, and that story took me to another website where a car dealership had been burned down. And just at that point, I'm like emotionally invested in like what has gone on in Wisconsin with the shooting of Jacob Blake, and it's just like, man, that's where anxiety comes from. You start carrying these the weight of all these things, or the schedules we have, the expectations that we have, even to be like social and maybe go see people now that things are kind of opening up. So one of the things that I found super helpful in the course of COVID, well, two things. My personal revelation in the last few months has been I have to stop like shoulding myself. That sounds like a curse word, which is awesome. I have to stop like whatever that should thing is. Like I should be doing more. I should be, even if it's taking a break, or I should be more self-aware. I should be praying more. I should be doing this diet. Like whatever that thing is, and listening to the Spirit. And one of the ways I've been able to do that, John Eldredge is a guy who wrote a book that is pretty relatively old as far as like Christian books, right? It's within your lifetime. He wrote this book called Wild at Heart, and he's got a series of them now, but he's developed this app. It's super simple. And the idea, his whole context of creating this was we were initially created to be in villages and small communities. And right now we have a global network. So we know what's going on in China. Nobody knows what's going on in China, but you know what I'm saying? Like we know what's going on around the world and other places. We get emotionally invested, and we need to be able to like shut it down. So he has this app. It's called a Pause app. Have you've been there? It's great.
It's awesome. I was going to mention it, so I'm glad.
It's fantastic, and you can set up notifications for it. It's spaced out to where you begin with a 1-minute pause, and it's just kind of this meditation prayer he walks through. And the sweetest part of it, especially, it's 1-minute pause. Like I've been talking for more than 1 minute, and at the end of it, he goes, "That's good enough for now." And there's something like freeing about how easy that is. And you work from 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute. I don't know how long it goes. I've only got the 3 minutes, but those are my pause. Anyways, that's one way I think to limit that burnout. I'm never going to use this term self-care. Like it's just not going to happen, but you should care for yourself. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that. I was going to, it popped in my head after I gave you the mic, so that was awesome. But he was on the Annie Downs That Sounds Fun podcast talking about that. And it's an awesome, really helpful just picture for what does it look like to listen to the Lord and quiet some of those voices that can speed up the anxiety in the way in our thought processes. So.
And I also just think about, sometimes for me, it really helps just reading about Jesus and when he would go off and pray on a mountain, or he would go off and like he literally needed his rest. And so a lot of it is like, just taking that time to be in the Word. And I've found myself reading through Psalms a lot recently because a lot of Psalm, and I think that's another thing we don't really talk about is like parts of the Bible are super heavy. Like these people are crying out to God. You know, they are depressed, they're anxious, they're all of these things. And that's one thing that I've really tried to do through this time is just not sugarcoat things with God. Like he already knows, you know, so really just going to him and being like, God, this is how I feel. Like this sucks. Today sucks, but you are good. Like remind me of your goodness through this. And so, yeah, just really like like Lamentations, just really like letting it out there and grieving through those things, but also not sitting in them, allowing myself to feel the feelings, but not, marinate in them has really helped. Yeah, but it's also really hard. Yeah.
And I can attest to the pause app too. It's a little creepy at first because it's a grown man like whispering to you with like sensual pad underneath. But yeah,
It should be Morgan Freeman, honestly. Yeah.
This next question came over text. This is for you, Matt. This question is specifically for you. They ask, does Matt Curtis live in Apex because he is the peak of good pastoring?
Can I guess who wrote that?
Probably Andrew Yates.
Okay.
Yeah. That was my guess. Is that your guess?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do not.
No.
Go Quay.
I mean, your wife just got a promotion though, so maybe it's in the cards.
No, we don't belong in the peak. We belong in Fuquay.
Okay. I do want to touch on a little bit about the idea of self-care and mental health, because this is a personal question for me. Something I've kind of been wrestling with is the correlation between like social media and mental health, and there's obviously one. So how do we as individuals, the tension I struggle with is wanting to stay informed, wanting to know what's going on in the world, but also knowing every time I go to that place that it can be toxic. So how do you strike that balance? How do you approach that in a emotionally and mentally healthy way?
There's 100% a correlation. I was looking at some graphs that, again, some science made. Yeah, some parabola graphs. I don't know what a parabola is, but I was looking at some graphs, and it was tracking in the last 9 years how instances of an anxious episode, a mental health episode happened that had affected an individual between the ages of like they did all ages, but the really significant thing was in this age group, young adults, it had in the last 9 years 60% increase in the number of people who have had experienced anxiety or other types of mental health issues or mental illness. And at the same time, they mapped that covered it up with the growth of social media, and like how in the last 12 years, Facebook went from 0 followers or whatever it's called to 2 billion. And they did every single app, and like the inclines just nearly were like 1 for 1. And I think it's tough. It has to be manageable though, right? Because if you're going to be connected to the community that we're connected to, if you're going to be connected to family back home, if you want to know what's going on, it's an election year. It's important to learn some of that stuff. The Dallas Mavericks are doing good again. You want to know that stuff. So there's going to be some kind of way of how to cope with all the information. And maybe that's hitting pause, shutting things down. I don't know the answer, David. I don't have social media for a reason, but anyways.
You have it, you just don't know how to use it.
Very fair.
The thing I think about is what our brains don't get a break. They don't get a recovery. It's so constant, and it's constant input, and it's constant information, and we're constantly in this direction and that direction. And I think about it as a recovery time for my brain. I have to babysit myself when it comes to my phone. My phone needs to have a bedtime. It needs to, have a time in the morning when I can get it out. It needs a basket in my house or a drawer that I can put it in so that I'm not on it. I need to be okay if people are upset with me, if I don't text them back in 30 seconds, which I don't. I apologize to all my friends. You already know this. But I have to babysit myself and set boundaries. And especially as someone with anxiety, my head's already spinning fast anyway. I have to be extra careful with that as well. My son is really good at he hates it when we pick up our phones and are like on our phones instead of looking at his face. And that's legitimate. Like, he feels unseen, and he will tell us, put your phones down, so give people permission to speak that into your life as well, but figure out boundaries. What that's going to look different for you than it is for me, but I really have to set some pretty solid boundaries.
Definitely. You guys covered it. Yeah.
Retweet that.
Yeah, retweet. Yeah.
All right, so let's go to another audience question. We'll go with this one. Is it unfaithful for a Christian to take medication for mental health disorders, or should you just lean on the Bible and prayer and God's people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think It's kind of like going back to we use the cast analogy, but if your leg is broken and you're just walking around with a broken leg, anybody's going to be like, whoa, like, why have you not gone to the doctor yet? Why are you not in a cast? What are you doing? And so although not all mental disorders or depression, not all of it requires medication, it's also, I don't think there's such a huge stigma around taking medication. And as Christians a lot, I think we kind of get in this mindset of, if I'm just praying more, or if I'm just in the word more, then like God's going to show up. And it's not that he's not going to show up, but it's also we are then putting our efforts, like we're trying to get an outcome based on our efforts and not on Christ. We're kind of projecting on him. And so I know when I'm on medication and I go to therapy regularly, but I know when I first had to go on medication, I was terrified. Like I literally, like the doctors were like, Lindsay, with my parents, because I was young, were like, she needs to be on this medication. I resisted for weeks. Like I was like, this is ridiculous. Like I have Christ. I'm not weak. Like, I'm not like everyone else. Like I don't need it. But medication has literally through that absolutely changed my life. And so I'll never forget my mom during that process of like having to get on medication, because after all, it was my choice. She told me, she's like, Lindsay, how do you know that this isn't God's way of using? This isn't God's way of healing you. Like you are putting God in a box by saying, no, God can heal me, but not by medicine. It's the same thing as saying, only God can heal me by medicine. And so yeah, I think, I definitely don't think it's unfaithful. I think there's definitely a boundary between fully relying on Christ and knowing that he does have the ability to heal us completely and fully without medicine, but also realizing that, if medicine is the path that he's going to use, that does not in any way make us weak or make us any less Christian, because that in itself kind of perpetuates this anxiety. It's just this kind of, and I got into a place where it was like, I knew I needed medication, but the focus was on me. It was like, okay, well, why can't I get out of this? Why can't I quit having these thoughts in my head? Why? And so it was just this constant, and a lot of it was my focus was then on me and what I couldn't do, and it wasn't on Christ and his ability to do things. And that happened for me to be through medication. So yeah, that's definitely a hard one. Yeah. Any thoughts? Yeah.
Like just how treatment has changed over the course of time. Like not that long ago, people were drilling into people's brains whenever they had these same issues, and then medication for a long time, I think, was or treatment, maybe not medication, maybe a combination of both, was like a straitjacket and isolation and medication that sedates. And medication now is really getting to the heart of issues and helping rewire. And I think we can, trust that stuff. Don't let somebody lobotomize you.
Yeah. Please don't. Yeah. I actually think another misconception is that if you go on medication, like you will be on it for the rest of your life. Yeah. And that's terrifying, to think like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to depend on this for the rest of my life. But for a lot of people, they don't. You get on medication as you're going into therapy just to basically get your baseline anxiety down to where therapy will help, to where what you're hearing isn't just going through one ear and out the other because you can't even focus. And so a lot of the times you're not on it for a very long time. And if you are, that's also okay. I've been on it since 7th grade, and like, I don't know what's going to happen further on, but like, if I'm on it, then that's okay. I was going to say something else and it just totally left. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, I just want to say that's been my experience. That I've been on and off of medication in different seasons of my life, depending on postpartum. I had postpartum depression, so that was really hard. So I was on medication in that season, and as I worked through that season, I wasn't on it anymore. And so I think that I would fit in that category of sometimes I've needed it and sometimes I haven't, and different therapies and that kind of thing have been able to help honestly just heal some things in my brain that have made it so that I'm not on it as consistently anymore.
I just say thank you for like sharing that. I don't know that people hear, hey, I've been on medication, I'm on medication, I've been off of medication. I think those are powerful stories that I need to hear, the audience needs to hear. So just thanks for being honest with us.
And I'm in counseling too. I've been in counseling for 17 years. mostly consistently. So
It's funny because once you go into counseling, you're like everyone around you, like, you need to go to counseling. Like, I don't care if you're healthy, like, go. Yeah, so I pester my boyfriend about it all the time. But yeah, so one more thing is that I think a lot of the fear that comes around taking medication is having to rely on it. And I kind of already like touched on that, but at the end of the day, yes, I think medication could be a problem if that is what you are relying on. But it's still, I can take medication and still rely on Christ for my satisfaction, for my health, for all of those things. Yeah.
That's good. We got a couple more questions. I think we got probably 5-10 more minutes, just depending on how many more questions come in. So keep them rolling, having a good conversation. This next one, just talking about kind of COVID season as a whole, just the past, I guess, 6, 7, 8 months. Lindsay, you talked about earlier how you wanted to return 2020.
Yeah.
Hashtag
Yeah.
return 2020.
Sure.
I'm all in on that movement. But I'm sure this question a lot of people can relate to is they ask, I felt isolated and depressed since COVID-19 all started. How can I find and grow in community during this season?
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to say that those feelings are absolutely validated, and you're not alone in them. And like I said earlier, I think this time has really people who wouldn't coin themselves as anxious people, or, people who have never ever really struggled with, the stereotypical like depression, are starting to really get a taste of what that's like. And it's new and it's scary to a lot of people, and a lot of it, I think, where anxiety comes is just not knowing what's going on. And so I think for a lot of people right now, for those who already have struggled with mental illness, it getting worse, or, and hopefully not, but yeah, just like the newness of it that can also bring anxiety. And so, yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is just communication. Like, I definitely, when I'm getting depressed or anxious, just do not want to tell people. Like, I just want to sit in my feelings and be like, like, I'm just going to pray it out. And sometimes that is great, but other times I need to let somebody know, and so a lot of it is I preach about, you're not a burden to others, but then hate almost telling my friends what's going on because I feel like a burden, even though I know that's not true. And so a lot of it is, for me, is being vulnerable. Like, hey guys, like, I'm not in a good place right now. And just accepting help. Like, I think that is just so strong, and something that I think our culture, just Western culture in general, we're not very collectivist. We really struggle at accepting help. And so, for me, is like, when it comes to community, just really being open and being vulnerable about what's going on. Yeah.
And I think, too, honestly, one of the things that anxiety has taught me over the course of my life is the heart of the gospel, which is that I cannot do this on my own, right? John 15:5, apart from me, you can do nothing. And so I have experienced in anxious places and depressed places that I'm at the end of myself completely. And so it's been this experience, this living of the gospel, which is that, gosh, I can't do it all on my own, and I do need help. And so I would echo that communication, and I think vulnerability, and being open and talking about what it is that you're going through, and saying, hey, I can't do this on my own. I recognize that, can you be in this with me? Can you be praying through this with me? I think that changes everything. And that kind of vulnerability creates a domino effect, and you'll start seeing other people say, hey, I thought I was the only one. And one of Satan's biggest tools is to make us think that we are the only one. He wants to isolate us. And so you could start this domino effect of vulnerability where other people are saying, hey, I've been struggling with, this thought process, or I've been really anxious about this, or I've never experienced a panic attack before, and I had my first one the other day and I thought I was going to die. I think that going first and being vulnerable creates community. It's really scary, and it's really hard, and it takes a lot of courage. And I think it's actually why weakness is a strength, because it's one of the hardest things to do in general. So, yeah.
I think practically hit us up. Like, that's honestly what we are here for, to coordinate relationships. I want to tell like a story. Early on quarantine, April or March, we put out something called a Growth Partner Challenge. And the Growth Partner Challenge is super simple. Identify 1, 2, 3 people that you will set like a schedule, read a chapter of, I'm looking in the wrong place again, read a chapter of John a day, pray for the lost, pray for the things that are going on in your life, and then set a physical goal. And it could be other physical, spiritual goal, but set a goal that you can, within that group, like be held accountable to. And a group of guys did that, and there's 5 guys that have been meeting, and they have, honestly, I don't know if there's a group that's been healthier in this season. And they set a high standard of vulnerability early on. They set a high standard of commitment early on. They've never, even though schedule conflicts have come up in the course of the last 6 months, they don't cancel their meeting. They reschedule their meeting. They went from reading the book of John in the first 30 days to reading the book of Mark. They went from reading the book of Mark over the next month to they actually developed a reading plan where they're going through Acts chronologically, meaning they're jumping around from Acts to Luke to Galatians and all over the place, and they are going deep and heavy. And there's something about genuine community. Like whenever somebody's experiencing it and they tell their story a little bit, people are drawn to it because we don't know what it looks like, because we haven't had that, because we don't have somebody I can fully trust to be fully broken with. So that we have stuff like that in place to connect you to community and to kind of even guide you through that. And if it's just like sharing your story, I love listening, and I don't have any advice, but I can listen really well. The end.
Shameless small group plug. Text small group to 313131.
No shame. No
Again,
shame.
small group to 313131. Anyone want to add anything else?
I'll just real quick. I think, like you were saying, I think in the world right now, nothing is consistent. You know, we don't have anything we can point to say, okay, by this date, things are going to be normal again, you know? And so I think for me, a lot of the times it's being consistent in something, whether that's, you know, setting my alarm clock for the same time each day, which I really don't do and should, or, you know, like I'm going to go on a walk at this time each day, and not that, you know, I don't want to put a should out there, you know, but just like having something, or community, you know, having a small group that each Friday night, you know, we meet at this time, having that to look forward to, I think is really important during this time, just because everything is so out of control and there's a lot of gray right now. And I think a lot of anxiety just in general really comes from the gray areas. So.
Cool. You want to add something, Carrie?
I've been reading through Mark, and I was in Mark 14 this week, just a couple days ago, and I don't think it was an accident, because it's when Jesus is in Gethsemane. And what's really interesting about it is that you almost see this anxiety that he has. You see the anguish. It says that he was distressed. And so he's experiencing as fully human. And sometimes I don't know that we really understand what it means that Jesus himself was fully human. He's experiencing the kind of, you know, anxiety and overwhelm, and kind of, he knows the trauma that's coming, and he knows that it's got to happen. He's known it since the beginning of time, but he even says to God, he cries out to God, and he's honest with him, his father, and says, hey, you know, I know you can do anything. If you can remove this cup from me, please do it. And he even knows that this is the plan and has been from the beginning. And so in that anguish and terror and, you know, overwhelm, he gets it. And so I feel like knowing that Jesus understands, and you see it in Hebrew 4, we don't have a high priest who, you know, doesn't get it. He understands our weaknesses, and he went through it, and because of him we can approach the throne of God with boldness, and there we'll find grace and we'll find mercy. And I just want you to know that you're not alone. We understand, but more than that, Jesus himself understands, and he's with you in it, even when you can't feel him, even when you can't see him. He's there.
Amen. About to break out in Waymaker over here.
Sorry, I can't.
Jason's going to whip out the guitar and lead us in worship now. Yeah, right. Well, yeah, we're going to close. We got one more audience question we're going to dive into. I want to ask you guys about resources, next steps, and then Jason's going to give away a $50 Amazon gift card. So this last question, Matt, I'm going to start with you on this one. They ask, what are some specific things a church/ministry can do to pursue people who aren't healthy? And I've got a stat for you before you go into that. It says 66% of American pastors claim they never or rarely mention mental health in the church.
That's great. I think this is one of those things, starting to have conversations and model conversations about just wellness, and Carrie kind of started us off and talking about the mind, the wholeness of who we are as beings, and setting a tone of it's okay to be broken. I think for a long time the church, and maybe this is just my own experience, but I felt like it could be just my projection onto what I thought, but church leadership felt so disconnected and so elitist and so righteous that they were unapproachable. And we need to get as far away from that as we can. And I feel like at Hope we do a good job of that. Mike communicates as common man, and I love that about him. And that's where we should all be. Like, the church is for broken people, and it's for people that have really jacked up stories and history and struggles. And the minute we can become a church or a ministry or a household with roommates that's willing to say, I suck and I need help with this and I need prayer and I need to find a way to do that return to joy thing and lean into people. I think it's interesting as you're talking about Jesus praying and sweating blood before he goes to the cross. Like, he's also on the cross. The last thing he says, he's still calling out to the Father, why, my God, why have you forsaken me? Like, he's still looking at the Father. And like, that's where we need to begin. And if we can be a community that's pointing people to the Father and not pointing people to like fixing yourself or bootstrapping it or hiding your issues, then then we'll be a healthy church, and we'll be an environment that's safe to come. And when we take this term, love people where they are and encourage them to grow in with their relationship with Jesus, like, loving people is meeting them exactly where they are, not just meeting them at Hope Community Church, but meeting them in their brokenness, in the pit, in the shame, and all those things. So, but by being people who are comfortable being broken, that's what we can do.
Y'all good?
I mean, I got lots to say, but yeah.
Leave it at that then. Let's talk about resources, next steps, kind of what's some resources we can check out, maybe if we want to learn more about what in the world a prefrontal cortex or whatever.
You got it. That's exactly how you say it.
Yeah, nailed it. I clearly need those resources. But yeah, just kind of your go-to resources, things people can go to in order to learn more about the topic.
Yeah. I literally brought a whole backpack of books. I won't go through all of them, but I am going to pull out two. The first one is called Try Softer. It is by Andy Colbert, and it is essentially about survival mode and trauma. And her premise is that trauma is anything that overwhelms our nervous system to where we can't cope. And I think we're all in this collective experience of that right now. But she walks through a lot of the just kind of science behind what's going on in our minds and bodies. She gives tools at the end of each chapter of how we can ground ourselves and what it looks like to be intentional about training our brains in healthy spaces. And it's all grounded in the gospel and what it looks like to be a beloved of God. So it's one of my favorite tools when it comes to mental and emotional and spiritual and physical health all coming together. And the other one that I brought, well, one of them, is Every Moment Holy. I don't know if you have heard of this, but it's a book of liturgies.
Jason, if you can keep up, put these links in the comments.
I'll only do two.
I see like 12 books in that.
It looks like a Harry Potter book, and my kids love it for that reason. But it has liturgies in it, which is essentially a prayer poem. And if you don't have words for yourself, which honestly, when you're super anxious and depressed, I often don't have words to pray. Someone else has to pray over me, or I need to go to the Psalms of Lament or this book. It has liturgies, prayer poems for when you're struggling and when you're suffering and when you're going through hard things. So.
Yeah, so that just reminded me, there's a verse about the Spirit groaning for us and like interceding for us when we don't have the words to say. And so sometimes I think we're also pressured to have the perfect prayer. And so a lot of times just sitting, like I said, just sitting in the feelings and just being like, I need your Spirit to speak for me. Like I don't have the words to say. But as far as resources go, I know I have a couple of links that I'll send Matt and that hopefully he can send out, but one of them is just like the National Suicide Hotline. And so just so you all know, that's a number you can call 24/7. There will always be a trained person there to speak to you or to speak. It's a perfect thing to give to friends or to give, like I have it saved in my phone. You know, you never know like when I need to send it to a friend or I need to use it, who knows. And there's also a text, it's in Spanish as well, so you can call a different number to have Spanish clinical trained professionals. And then there's also a texting one, so it is confidential. So, you know, I think sometimes it could be scary to kind of talk on the phone. It's a level down from in person, but it's still kind of like, how do I express this? And so there's a texting hotline. And so there's, and I'll give Matt the information that he can pass on, but there's websites that you can go to and chat with them right there. But just in general, I think there's a lot on as bad and hard as you know, the internet and everything can be. There's also a lot of beauty in it and resources. And so just really honestly, like just Googling, like, I don't know, like National Suicide Prevention Hotline or things like that. And it goes through like, you know, and I'm focusing on suicide, but there are things for like depression, like what are the signs of depression? You know, just really Googling that and going to like a credible source and like, how do I detect signs of depression in my friends and things like that. So it really is kind of, you can just kind of look around on the internet. And although that's like, you know, not everything is going to be, you know, necessarily like that's how it is for everyone, it's still definitely a good thing to do. Yeah. And just having the conversations like we're having right now, having conversations with people that you know struggle with these things and just being like, I have no idea what this is like. Like, can you just help me understand? Like, just tell me what you're feeling. And then having the ears to really hear it, I think is really important. Yeah. Yeah.
We'll send it on down to Matt.
Just to make you aware, maybe you don't know this, but if you're like looking for a counselor, you don't know where to look and who to trust, because the counselor or a therapist relationship, it varies. It might not be a good fit with the first person you go to, but like we would obviously recommend that you meet with a Christian counselor because it's kind of two different worlds as far as I know. And if you contact us, we have a care ministry that has a ton of partnerships and relationships throughout the triangle. And all you have to do is say, like, this is my insurance. Who do you have? And they can meet with you first and kind of talk and figure out where you need to go. And you mentioned suicide. It's a significant thing. It's one of the things I read over the course of the last week or so was that suicide is the second leading cause of death for individuals that are young adults. And that's true from like 11 to 34, which is out of control, and it's heartbreaking. And we know that the world is broken, and we know that people don't know how to respond to it. And that statistic was previous to what we are currently experiencing and just the turmoil and the despair that it seems like is culture. So the prayer is just be aware of you. And that's kind of, we didn't really talk too much about it, just the emotional state of where you are. There's a book that was really formative for me that I've read in the last year called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. And it really just hit on a bunch of stuff for a big bum like me to kind of really experience. Stop doing things for God, and that's that shoulding yourself. Stop doing things for God, but do things with God. Sit in His presence, talk to Him, listen to Him, and those things. So it's been fantastic. It's a great book. That's all I got for you.
Cool. Thanks, guys. And Matt, as you alluded to, this is a heavy, multi-layered conversation, and there's only so much we can cover in an hour, but I've enjoyed the dialogue. I've enjoyed the conversation. You know, we hope you at home continue the conversation in the midst of small groups. I mean, there's not a lot we can do right now in terms of gathering together, but we can all do this. We can get together in the living room, in the homes, and just do life together. Talk about what's going on, talk about the Word, talk about important issues like this. So I appreciate you guys coming and weighing in. But the moment we've all been waiting for, we're gonna throw it back to Jason here for the raffle to see who is the winner of our $50 Amazon gift card. So Jason, is your mic on?
Caleb.
My husband.
This thing on? Does it work this time? I think it's working. We're going to go with that. What's up? So, yeah, the winner. We get a lot of hate in the messages about this being rigged. Proof, this is not rigged. We got all the names in this little spinny thing, so we're gonna just click it and see who wins. So, see, it's spinning for those of you.
Legit.
And it is Monster Mike. All right, so we have, see, right there, it says Mike. No cheating. So Monster Mike, you win the, is it Amazon?
Yeah.
It's Amazon. Yeah. Amazon gift card. You can get bother David for that. Shooting it back to y'all.
Thanks, Jason. I believe I see a question up here. I believe it was from Monster Mike that says, what if you don't have insurance and are a broke college student who lives with his parents because it's cheaper? Well, Amazon gift card will help. So congratulations. Just don't go spending it all on TikTok followers. He doesn't need to. He already has enough. The videos. But Carrie, will you pray us out? Do you mind?
Definitely. I would love to. Jesus, we are grateful that you are a God who understands. You are not distant or unapproachable or unaware of what we're walking through or experiencing or feeling when we're struggling with hard emotions. And I'm thankful that you chose that. You chose to come walk with us and be fully human so that you could know. And I just pray that you would meet every person who is listening and watching with your love, that in whatever anxiety or depression or overwhelming feelings they might be in, that they will be able to open their hands and understand that they are completely and totally loved by you, regardless of anything that they do or don't do. And I pray that your power would be made known in our weakness, and that would be an experiential just a lifestyle that we get to live. So we trust you. And I just pray that you would be a refuge for us in this season, God. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you, Matt, Carrie, Lindsay. Appreciate you guys. And thank you at home for tuning in tonight. Remember, we got Breakfast in the Loft every Sunday. We do these once a month, so stay tuned. And, of course, get in touch with us. Just if you've got prayer, if you want to join a small group, we're here for you, and we love you. So we see you guys. Check you out next time.